This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 216 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast, and we're talking today about what we learn from travelling. I am a huge believer in the lessons that we learn from travelling. I am sure that travel has taught me pretty much all the important things that I need to know about life, the universe and everything. In the book that I'm writing at the moment about why travel is so important, and if you haven't caught up with me chatting about that, I do talk about it back in episode 210 if you want to know a bit more. But one big topic is all the amazing things that travel teaches us. In fact, it's a thought I have quite often when I take my son out of school to travel. Not so much this year, but in other years it's been something that's happened more often. And I'm always kind of aware of making sure that the travel experiences he has are the kind that means I can really confidently say he's learnt more from that trip than he would have if he'd stayed in school. And I'm really sure that he does every time because we learn so much from travelling. And I guess the kinds of things that we learn while we're travelling are very many and varied, and I've been asking people about this recently. So today you'll hear from three guests who all share a couple of lessons that travel has taught them, and they're all different, but they're all such a good reminder that we really must travel because we learn so much from it. Now, my first guest today is Justin Meneguzzi, and he has a couple of really important and useful lessons from travel.
I think I've learned a lot over the years from traveling. I think the one that's perhaps more personal to me, in my experience, so I'm hearing impaired. So I've got a sensory neural hearing loss of it's different in each year. So it's 25% in one year and 30% in the other. And as a kid growing up, that kind of affects your social skills growing up. When you're not quite certain of what someone has said, you kind of second guess yourself in social interactions. And that even still happens today. If I go to the shops, and I'm not sure what someone has said, I'll immediately start to get a bit hot under the collar and get a bit embarrassed. And so before I travelled, I perhaps didn't have the confidence that I would have had after I travelled because there's always that kind of self-doubt around social interactions and meeting strangers, someone who you're not familiar with, especially people with accents. Accents are really, really difficult. Yeah. And so the lesson I guess I've learned from traveling, the first place I traveled to by myself was actually South America. I went to Brazil for Carnival, which is kind of funny because you got the Portuguese accent, which can be quite difficult sometimes. Yeah. But then you've also got the banging drums and the tambourines and all that stuff that comes with the Carnival and the street festivals there.
It's one of the noisiest places you could go, probably.
It's one of the most confronting, I guess, places that a deaf person could go. Yeah. It wasn't all peaches and rosy, but I learned a lot about, I guess, how tolerant people are to that and how people are willing to go that extra mile to help you listen or to repeat themselves. You don't often need to rely on a common language to communicate effectively.
That's so true.
And I think that experience of being exposed to people who didn't speak English as a second language, being put in those uncomfortable positions or situations, really helped me grow in my confidence in interacting with strangers and learning that, it's such a cliche that they're kind of a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet. But I guess I now believe in that a lot more than I think I once did. So that's kind of the biggest lesson for me personally. I guess the other stories I've learned from that, kind of connected to that, is that weird is relative. we grow up in Australia, or anywhere where your listeners might be, and you grow up accepting a set of social norms about what's right, what's wrong. That will, to relationships. It's just the way you go about your day, the way you order a coffee. There's all these kind of like norms in what we do, even the things we eat. And I guess travel has taught me not to be judgmental of what is weird to me, because the person I'm talking to or the culture I'm in might think it's weird that, we go to Bunnings on election day and have a sausage, or any of those things that we do in Australia that are particularly unique. So I think that's the other really important thing that I've learned. Like, it's made me a lot more tolerant as a person.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, those are two brilliant lessons. I think the confidence from travel thing is such a broad lesson. I know that's exactly what travel taught me. Like, when I was like in my early 20s, before I'd travelled a lot, I was still quite shy and definitely not, up for a chat with a stranger. And then I lived overseas for a few years, and I really feel like I came back a completely different person in that regard. And it's so nice to be able to be more, it's not just confident, but willing to chat to strangers and to, because like the cliche says, they are friends that you just haven't met yet. And having that extra confidence just makes the world of difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's when you're, as you say, when you go and live overseas for a bit, when you don't have your bubble to protect you and you're kind of forced to stand on your own 2 feet, and you realise you can actually do those things, then that kind of carried with you forever. When I have kids, I'm going to 100% encourage them to go study overseas or live overseas, because I think it's one of the best life lessons you can get.
100%, absolutely agree. I'm always bringing home study abroad brochures for my son. He's only 10, but I still leave them. I still leave them lying on the kitchen table, just so that to him it's a normal thing. And by the time he gets to uni, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, where will I go to study now?" Some great lessons there. I think my favourite is Justin's explanation that you learn weird is relative. The more you travel, the more you understand that different is just different, and every country and every culture, and even your own, or especially your own, has parts that are different, elements that are unusual to other people, but it's not that they're weird or particularly unusual. They're just different, and that's a very good thing and an important lesson, I think. My next guest today is Tasha Goldberg, and she has 2 lessons to share as well. One a particularly personal one, and one a broader lesson.
On a very personal level, the opportunity to travel has taught me so many things. I mean, the experiences really are just, that's why it's so intoxicating, because it's an endless opportunity to explore and learn. But I do remember at one point that I was traveling a lot. I had, a job doing reporting. I was writing for a magazine. I had a column, so I was also doing I had a contribution to this magazine. So I had a couple of different things that I was doing, and in between assignments, rather than flying home, I would just stay abroad and have, a month or 2 in these different locations. So this wasn't a time that I was traveling a lot consecutively.
Right.
So it was from one place to another place rather than coming home. And what's happening for me in my own personal life at that time was that I had a heartbreak. As everyone experiences, usually most people can relate to one of the very tender moments in your life history where you really experience how painful it can be to have your heart broken. Mm-hmm. And what I learned during traveling was how abundant love was. And while I was missing and lamenting over this opportunity to have a relationship between this one person and I that was, no longer happening, I was experiencing love with kids, with elders, with different people in all these different contexts while I was traveling. And it really gave me a strength to feel I was lovable, I was capable of love, that I was able to experience this whole spectrum of what love is, rather than just have it be a direct relational one-on-one type of an experience. So I think one of the things I really value is the lesson that I learned of how many ways we can experience love.
That's a beautiful lesson. And I agree, travel can really teach you that, because you're exposed to so many different kinds of people in different situations. And
that in these relationships, that there is no, story, there's no history between you. You don't have, when you meet somebody, they don't necessarily know the drama that you might be experiencing in your home life. And so you are kind of free to have this relationship with them that's completely based on something else, and something that's really hard to describe, but you can connect with people in your heart. And as we know, also with like language barriers and traveling in places where you're not from, or you're an outsider, the way that you connect is also often for me like through my heart. And I feel that people feel my heart, and let me feel their heart, and that becomes the beginning of these incredible stories that we collect as travelers.
It's so true. Beautifully put.
Thank you. And then the other thing that I was thinking is, as far as a really important lesson that I've learned. So as you know, I have my career, or my professional background is that I'm a reporter and a writer and a video producer in the realm of sustainable development. And so a lot of the things that I had experienced or been exposed to or been privy to was policies and theories. And one of the things that I learned while traveling is what it actually is like to know these topics or these themes for people who are living on the ground. So, for example, there was a meeting that I attended and that I was reporting on that had to do with disaster risk reduction. And, as we all know, when the climate changes, it can impact or increase the likelihood of natural disasters, or the severity even of natural disasters. So this was a whole political conversation that was very policy level, and there's these words that people toss around that we assume that we understand what that means. And one of the words that was tossed around in this context was resilience. And it is a very intellectual word, there's a framework, a political framework around what resilience is, how to create it, how to support it, how to sustain it. And after that meeting, I stayed on, and this happened to be when I was visiting Tunisia. And I had an opportunity to spend time with people who were actually living through devastating floods. So this was an example of a natural disaster that had happened. And without being engaged in the policy and the political discussions, they were surviving, and they were adapting, and they were creating and sustaining resilience. So my opportunity to have these very beautiful, intimate conversations over dinner with one or two people, to be invited into people's homes, to be given a tour of not only the destruction of the flood, but how these people were rebuilding their homes, their communities, their sources of food. This gave me this incredible a way to understand something not just as an intellectual idea, but actually as an experience, and to have a broadened understanding of the global challenges that we're facing, as well as the solutions.
What a perfect situation to have been in, to be able to have that, quote unquote, academic theory first, and then see it in action and really, connect those two. Not many people get to have that combination, I suppose. So that's really powerful. Yeah,
I think that it's there. It's always there. It's just that we kind of isolate ourselves in our expertise, or in our what we may have access to, and that part of travel is where I feel like that beautiful lesson comes in, because it isn't the same thing as just having, one conversation about a topic, but it's actually having an experience. And no matter what the topics were, when I would spend time afterwards in communities, it was very easy and accessible to find how it was that these people where I was living, my mind was already kind of attuned to the concepts that I was reporting or studying. So I was picking up on that in the communities. If it was about food security, about renewable energy, there were all the different areas of sustainable development. When I would leave the meeting, my mind was already kind of funneled towards that and focusing on those things. And that was what I was thinking about. So the conversations that I was having would naturally go to those places. And then because, again, that love and that ability to kind of open your heart and feel people open their heart, I felt really that people were welcoming me into their realities, allowing me to share the challenges and the solutions and exchange with me what life was like, what was really like for them. And actually that is part of what was the inspiration for me to create the series that I'm working on now, Evidence of Hope, is to bring that not just from my own personal experience, but to share that with everyone so that we all have a chance to continue to face these challenges, but also bring forward, highlight, celebrate the solutions that people, even without getting, sometimes they're not doing it because they're regulated to do it or that they have funding to do it. They're just surviving. They're just adapting. These are examples of ways that we can more broadly understand these concepts, but also work towards improving our reality and developing sustainably.
I really like one of Tasha's underlying lessons and messages here that for lots of topics, there's so much information out there. We can learn a lot about a country or a culture or different aspects about them before we go, and then be on the lookout for kind of the real world version of it when we're visiting. I know I've mentioned before, but just briefly, it's like my obsession with the Danish education system from before we went to Denmark, and then making sure I found people like teachers to ask about it while we were there. I just think the stories that you hear from real people are never quite the same as the theory you read, as Tasha kind of emphasised as well. And it's important to get input from both of these things, not just the theory or what you can find by research, but actually by talking to real people, and you can learn so much from it. Now, my final guest today is Lindsay Williams, and the lessons she learnt from travel are more about languages than anything else, because that is her complete specialty. And I have also learnt a lot of lessons from travel about languages, so I really enjoyed my chat with Lindsay.
With my work and my entire life basically revolving around languages, some of my biggest lessons from travel are about language. And something that always comes to mind is how you just do not need utter 100% native-like fluency to have incredible experiences. That can happen with just a few words. And I love that so much. And in Myanmar, for example, where I've been twice now, first in 2011, where things were very different. That first time, internet wasn't as easy access, and I knew a lot less languages and a lot less about language learning at that time. And I downloaded this PDF before I left Bangkok, that was like Burmese by ear, and it had these little audio MP3s, and I would sit in the evening and try and pick up these words, and then I was there, so I had this chance to then go out and use it the very next day. And it was brilliant, just being able to say, oh, it's hot, isn't it? And, oh, it's spicy, isn't it? And things like that. And then, so the second time I went, these things, even though it had been years, and this was now like 2018, these little phrases had just really, really stuck with me. And so much more so, I feel, than if I had tried to go all in and really intensely learn Burmese in the 2 weeks I was there last time. I just remembered these phrases solidly and still had incredible experiences. So that is my biggest lesson, and the thing that I am most passionate about sharing when it comes to travel and language is that just a few words, a few phrases can make a world of difference.
Yeah, I think very few people expect you to be fluent in the local language when you're a traveller, do they? Because, you might be in a country where there's like 3 million speakers, or maybe even only 1 or 2 million speakers of that language in the whole world, so they don't expect everyone to speak it. It's really about the intention behind it, isn't it? And the caring enough to try, perhaps. And you've got a few phrases that can go a really long way, can't it?
Yeah, yeah. And it really shows, I think, as long as you try saying them with a smile, and if someone, kind of says, "Oh, you mean this?" and you laugh at yourself and you have that openness to be willing to just go, "Okay, yeah, I mean that, I mean that." I'm not asking for smelly socks, I'm asking for the fish or whatever it is. Whatever that's come out wrong. Yeah. And it's just such an easy thing. Just a few words and a smile can get you a long way.
Well, you say it's such an easy thing, and it is, but it's also really hard at first, isn't it? Because you feel, I know I do, if it's a language I don't know anything about, I feel really self-conscious. I feel really worried that I'll say something stupid or that I have no idea how to pronounce it. At first, it's not easy. It's kind of a skill you need to practice, isn't it?
Yes. And so much of that skill comes with, like I was saying about the smile, it's the confidence that you have to go with it, and the confidence and the willingness that you are able to give it a go. So actually, a lot of language skill isn't knowing words, understanding the grammar, being able to read and write, blah, 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 all of the stuff that we think it is, which, it is in part, but a lot of it, especially when it comes to travel and those kind of mostly one-time encounters, is just having the confidence inside to go, I know the bits that I need to say. I know the keywords that are going to get me there. I just need to say 2, please, thank you, to get the 2 tickets for the bus, or to get the 2 meals from that street food vendor, or whatever it is. And just having the confidence to give it a go. And I think that comes from not necessarily being confident with the language itself, like I'm saying, but just being able to say, I'm here, I'm in this place, I'm so far from home, this may be the only time I'm here. When else am I going to get the chance to try this? And, I think when you are traveling, you do tend to, it's much easier to fall into that than it can be sometimes at home, when we know everything. And so we put these kind of restrictions on ourselves, almost of like, no, this is the comfort, this is what happens at home. When we're away, sometimes it's easier to lose that and to feel like, yeah, I'm going to give this a go.
Yeah, that's so true. And kind of always think, what's the worst that can happen? And the worst really is that the people look at you like you're crazy, which rarely happens, or you say something's not quite right and you kind of figure it out between you and everyone understands, or you laugh, or you're understood. That's kind of the only consequences. So nothing's really terrible, that there's nothing really terrible possible. So why not have a go?
Exactly right. I love that. What's the worst that can happen? And as soon as you realize that you're not going to die, it's all going to be okay.
Exactly.
Then it's worth trying. Yeah.
I do love a good language learning situation. And so Lindsay is totally right about these kind of lessons we learn from travel. The most important one being just have a go. And it's hard at first. And I think Lindsay and I definitely both acknowledge that. But the more you travel, the more you have a go at just a few phrases of a language, the more you'll get out of it, and you will learn that it is such an awesome thing to do. Alrighty, well, that is my selection of lessons from travel today, so that we can be reminded just how important travel is and why we want to keep doing it. Thank you very much to my fabulous guests. They were all first-time guests on the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I've been doing a batch of new interviews recently, so I hope you've enjoyed meeting each of them. I will let you know where you can find out more about them. First up, I chatted with Justin Meneguzzi, and you can find some of his work. And actually, I highly recommend reading some of the incredible stories he's written, which are all linked at justinmeneguzzi.com. I then chatted with Tasha Goldberg, and she has a project called Evidence of Hope with some really fabulous stories there too. You can find that at evidenceofhope.com. And finally, I chatted with Lindsay Williams, and you can find out more about Lindsay at her site, Lindsay Does Languages, which is at lindsaydoeslanguages.com. If you have any ideas you want to pursue about learning foreign languages, Lindsay is the go-to girl. She's so much good info there. As always, come along and chat with us in the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers. There's a link in the show notes, or just type in Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook and you should be able to find it. As always, the show notes for this episode can be found at notaballerina.com/216. I would love to hear about your lessons from travel too. What has travelling taught you? So come along and chat in Facebook and let me know. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.